Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Quaggling Sand. It's the early morning of 29 April 2021. Allergy season it is what it is, as it has been apparently for the whole year. Not just the usual April, May, March-ish, April, May of typical years. So my voice is still not 100%, but thank you for listening anyway. So, yeah, this goes on. I don't know why. It's been so much fun here. Every once in a while, my voice will return, and I think, oh, good, we're back. But no. So, thank you for tolerating, listening, soldiering on. I know I am doing the same. So, welcome, and I guess I will jump right into the lingering frustration of this sprint idea, which I presented, or I posited in the first episode of the show. And I have too many things that I allow to interrupt. And when I say things, I don't mean like cool or fun things. I mean like different aspects of related projects that, like shiny metal objects, distract my attention. And I mean, literally, the entire notion of cognitive load has really come to the fore. I used to think, I mean, I'm a software developer. I've sat at a computer with my one monitor for my entire.
I don't know that one.
Thank you, Amazon product. I've sat at my computing device. Yeah. Sorry about that. I've sat at my computer for decades, usually with one monitor. I've never really been I must have 12 monitors around me at all times type. I do virtual desktops to be sure. And I know people that must have at least 2, possibly 3 monitors. And I certainly see there are Instagram channels dedicated to sensationalizing multi-monitor setups, I guess, among other workspace features. But it's really, so the argument is always that switching monitors or switching virtual desktops is a cognitive load, just like looking up something, probably on Stack Exchange to copy and paste. But anytime you have to interrupt your workflow for something as simple as switching monitors, switching desktops, even turning your head to the monitor, right? So you're switching, looking at a different monitor. So placement, window layout, saving, and this is probably, I'm more familiar with doing this in a Linux desktop environment, but your platform of choice, it may vary, but being able to sit down or stand, as I do, at your work area and having it all be just so is one of those things that saves you the added effort, angst, cognitive load of moving windows around, opening things, all that. So that to me is a little bit, maybe it's too much. I don't know. That's just my work style. I'm fine with the one monitor. But I will tell you, once I get off the monitor, right, off what's in front of me, and I move to actual task, right, or factoring projects, especially that I'm working on this stuff by myself, I have no interrupt mask, and I most definitely get drawn into reading articles, latest technologies, best practices, all that. So I'm not sitting around reading fiction books. It's mostly, what's going on with event-driven design patterns in microservice architectures. Do we want to go monolithic versus microservices? Do we want to stick with Python? Is Golang going to be the next big thing? What about Sidecar? Data plane? Which database is for you? Go managed? Stick with your own? And the list goes on and on. I'm just looking at articles I've been reading about in the last week. And so these are all important. Pardon me. These are all important as a developer, as the multi-hat wearing DevOps engineer, software architect, marketing, sales, front of the house, back of the house person. I kind of need to know for my own edification, perhaps, or for overall participation in the tech marketplace. I kind of have to know what's going on. You probably do too. Hey, why are you taking your time to listen to this? Maybe I'm offering something that you can agree with or will find valuable, especially when we get to the stories part. But anyway, so as I migrate my age-old database schema, plural, from I actually have Git history I could check, but I think 2012, 2015 timeframe is when I was really initially creating this food truck centric web application. Before that, I had my first Android phone. I think it was the Android 1, right? The sort of Sidekick inspired trackball, flip out screen, keyboard, excruciatingly slow. I brought that phone to my interview with the Palm. It turned out to be the Palm Pre development team. I had it sitting in front of me, and I think probably the most discussion about that came with my interview slot with Travis. I won't call him out here too much, but if you know the terrain, you know that Travis, presently working on Fuchsia, that Travis, is it was an interesting chat, and we kind of ripped the phone apart virtually. Like, I didn't actually take it apart, but we were discussing what worked and what didn't. Hey, that sounds like a good topic for the FFS talk podcast, which is my other endeavor. Anyway, so we kind of dug into what's the deal with this thing, and these are all ancient history at this point, but the seeds of the things I'm working on now come from that time frame, and it seems like forever. In internet time, it's like, well, it's the difference between the Android 1 and then the arguably cooler, I don't know if it was the Android 2, but it was the metallic finish, different hinge, flip-up screen, more like a Sidekick. And I actually really liked that phone, and it had a touchpad instead of a trackball. This was in the age of BlackBerry, a very interesting time. So fast forward to today, and there's all this ideation that I put in back then, and even some implementation. I don't know about innovation, maybe. Those are my three I's: ideation, innovation, implementation. So I put in all this time, and I have a whole pile of code, and over the years, every time I've had an idea, I've first thought, hey, I can use that. I can use what I've written. But I never really went through I would copy a tree, clone it. But essentially copy what I had, tear out the parts that didn't apply. Horrible practice, right? Just the worst way to do something. And but it was interesting, right? So I would implement some things, and then suddenly I'm moving to Vegas after a house fire, or I'm working with Intel and traveling around the world, and then I'm trying to continue working on some projects after the big giant layoff where they got rid of 12,000 people. So there's certainly there've been fits and starts, and there've been different ideas, and I've had this core architecture that I never really turned into a core architecture. So I'm almost done with that. Arguably, I could have been finished about 2 weeks ago, or maybe 1 week ago. But I've kind of, through the initial set of projects, through the way. I don't know what that means, but I've been thinking about actual use case once the core is functional and actually modular. And when I say core, I mean like the core database schema to manage simple things like user accounts and authentication, storage of credentials and tokens and whatnot. So it's your basic core services that would apply to anything from a blog to a mobile vendor business development platform and all sorts of other things. So I'm sort of maybe I will blame some of it on the classic analysis paralysis. Any engineer knows that one. And it doesn't. Software is easy because you can sit in your own single or multi-monitor workspace and what if all day. I guess if you're building a bridge, it's a different type of problem. But certainly, when you start doing what if all day, sometimes that's good. But eventually you have to say, wait, okay, I think we've done all the what ifs. I think we're looping. Anyway, so I have my core. So database schema, model, probably JSON schema for some of the client side or model library side. And then the beginnings of like you'll call it a front end. And then I have on the drawing board a GraphQL front end for external calling, and then for internal between eventual, either, maybe monolithic because in small scale, but I'm trying to plan ahead. So possibly a gRPC scheme for the core services. So anyway, there are lots of stuff, and when I'm home growing my potatoes and listening to disco music, I have plenty of time to get into analysis paralysis loops, and so there we are. In the meantime, it occurred to me, so I have these two projects that have been sitting on, if I had a back burner, if you remember if your family or you had a station wagon with that flip up seat in the back, if you weren't carrying enough luggage, or if you put it on the roof rack, you could flip that seat up and have the kids stare at the people behind you on the freeway during your family road trips. The voice of experience. So in the back burner, I've had two projects, which I think are cool and probably would be revenue generating because I believe there's actual utility. And I've allowed, if you're familiar with priority inversion, I've allowed, priority may not be totally applicable here, but it's a similar problem. I've allowed large projects, larger undertakings, the whole mobile vendor, food trucks and food tents and whatnot. That entire thing is sort of my prototypical location service platform concept that is applicable to other things, but it ends up taking up a tremendous amount of time because I was forming an owners association, but then that's a whole nother story for another show. But so really I've had these, what I think are interesting ideas sitting behind a more complicated set of ideas So yeah, just over the last week or so, like, why am I not just trying? Because so I'll stop interrupting myself. So the two ideas are, one is CantHave. That's a silly name, huh? And the other one is NookieMap. Allow me to explain. So CantHave is inspired by, well, how many times have you either yourself or been with someone who can't have something? Onions, peanuts, milk, bread, yeah, whatever. And so I was at Hack Holyoke. I think I may have said this somewhere. I don't know about on the Quaggling Sand Show somewhere at some point. I may have mentioned this. I've mentioned it how many times over the years. So I was at a Hack Holyoke hackathon. And the second hackathon, it was in April, and I can't remember which year it was. It was a while ago. Alexis Ohanian was there. That was interesting. He's an interesting character. And so it was in April, early April. So some of you may be more savvy to the calendar of different cultures and religions. So it was mealtime, and if you've ever been to a hackathon, you know that there's no shortage of bagels and donuts and pizza and cupcakes. It's a keto nightmare. But as it turns out, on that particular weekend, hey, we don't have any unleavened bread here. So there was a little group of people kind of off to the side. And I said, oh, you guys aren't hungry? And they said, well, we can't eat anything on the table, it's kind of buffets, whatever. So yeah, we can't have any of that. I said, why not? Well, because it's Passover. We can't eat any of that. And I'm laughing just because it was one of those like, yipes. And I refrained from telling the organizers, because when I did tell them later, I kind of mentioned it in passing, and they were like, they were not unmoved. They were very like sad. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was a sort of a gut punch, really. I mean, virtually, and so anyway, so how do you say to your guests of an event? It could be a hackathon, it could be a wedding, it could be a party, it could be a public event. How do you keep track of that? Right? And Passover is a calendar event, right? Like you'd have to know, if you are not aware of different calendars and different significant dates on them. Sorry, I'm just reading something really quick here. I wanted to make sure I wasn't completely botching the the holiday. So how do you form your calendar, your menu, your whole event around individuals who are, some people may be following the Jewish calendar for the Passover holiday. Some people maybe are observing Ramadan. Some people maybe don't eat fish on Fridays. Is that the one? Or is it fish on Fridays? I can't remember. We never really got into any of those. But so the point is, any collection of food allergies, calendar observation of holidays per culture, per religion, per practice. So allergies, observations, and then basic preferences or dietary changes. So, for example, keto, which is something I'll probably talk about another time, but if you are trying to eat more keto, low or no carb, low protein, or if you're maybe Mediterranean diet, or, so you have these preferences. And from a menu planning and event planning standpoint, basically figuring out what people cannot have is an easy way to avoid serving them things that they can't have, right? So if you are gluten-free and it maybe has something to do with a medical condition or a preference, really doesn't matter. And it's really not the concern of the event organizer or the chef or the caterer or others involved in that side of the undertaking. It shouldn't really matter. The important thing is, this person can't have gluten, leavened products of any kind, leavened breads, can't have meals before sundown, can't have dairy, can't have peanuts, can't have onions. Doesn't matter if I just don't like peanuts, if I can't have bread because I'm observing a ketogenic diet. Maybe I have Crohn's disease. Maybe I have Hashimoto's. Maybe I have a severe onion allergy that will put me into anaphylactic shock if I eat wet onions. True story. Not me, but someone I know. So that was an actual story at Hack Holyoke, and they were very frustrated that they didn't know this. And then, fast forward to my participation in a reality show that my former employer Intel was producing called America's Greatest Makers. The voice of experience in me chimes in, hey, do we have somebody who's keeping track of dietary requirements of the participants, of the mentors, of which I was one? We were having, I want to say, 24 teams of 1 to 3 people. So that's a nice chunk of people from around the country, plus mentors. Probably, I think we had 2 mentors for each team. Different. No, that's not true. It was not 2 per. Anyway, so we're talking. Let's call it 100 people from all around, different cultures, different upbringings, different regions of. In that case, it was all from around the U.S., but that doesn't matter. So they left it to the production company. The production company never really found out, and so they never really surveyed people. So we had our craft services table with all kinds of junk food. I think that's pretty typical. And I know for a fact that 2 of the mentors in the mentor team, a couple of Intel employees, and then some contractors, couldn't eat most of the things that we would have for lunches, or if we went out to dinner, it was like, well, I can't eat this, can't eat that, which is totally fine. Nobody should, well, that's the whole thing about CantHave, right? You shouldn't be ignored or not permitted to eat or drink or generally have a nice time because of whatever. I mean, this is until you're eating gruel because you're imprisoned or otherwise not allowed. So the whole point of this is to free up that communication channel that says, okay, we're going to have this set of people participating in something. Let's manage who can't have things. So I've gone on at length of it because it turns out that informally, as I've mentioned, I live here in Las Vegas, and I've certainly seen comments from people in the service industry, so servers at restaurants, possibly kitchen staff, frustrated having to deal with, in quotes, people who can't have certain things. And the comments are usually along the lines of, am I your dietitian? Or why can't you just go somewhere else? It's very frustrated. And then I have been sitting with people, occasionally who will say, hey, I can't have gluten, can't have onions, can't, whatever. Does this item have any of those things? And then they say, no, no, no. And then luckily, somebody, manager, somebody will come out and say, by the way, it does have those things, right? So the server didn't know the ingredients. So having to repeat oneself, having to fill out forms, if you go to an event and there's catering, especially over multiple days, sometimes there will be a form you fill out. It's like filling out a resume or a renter application or a loan application. There's always the same fields to fill in, right? Like give us the last 3 residences and the landlords or the mortgage, or all the is repeating yourself. And there's no repository where you can just say, here's the stuff I can't have. Can I connect this with an event invitation or just generally make it available? So that's it. That's in a nutshell. It hopefully will make it easier for the wedding or the party or the conference or the reality show production. But in general, if all goes to plan, would enable people in any given region to say, oh, I didn't really know that 2% of the population can't have gluten. And again, for whatever reason, the entire platform is not intended to be HIPAA compliant medical data tracking. So from the perspective of the caterer or the event planner, to know who doesn't want or can't have, technically, something, that's all they really need to know. And it's fair to know that ahead of time and accommodate people. So, vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, well, let's include gluten-free, lactose intolerant, can't eat before sundown, can't have leaven breads and whatnot. Right? So, not a big deal. As far as I know, nobody's doing this. I've had the can't have idea floating around in my mind for a couple years now. It takes advantage of some of the pieces that go into the mobile vendor. So event, user pref, right, foods. So yeah, why am I not rolling that out? That is a great question. And then I mentioned the Android One, which was my first Android phone. And I'm trying, I still had my BlackBerry Bold. Is that right? What was the one with the so BlackBerry Curve. That's right. So I had my BlackBerry Curve, which is probably my favorite phone ever, which sounds crazy. Rock solid, built like a tank. Loved the keyboard. Could totally whip out massive documents. I would have discussions with our manufacturing counterparts in Shenzhen at 2 a.m. on my BlackBerry. Totally fine, right? So quickly tapping out messages and whatnot. So the swipeable keyboards on the screen and everything, it's okay. But the BlackBerry to me was just about perfect for my uses, and that's sort of the can't have mantra too, right? So let's make the user experience good. You don't have to laugh at people or chide them or become frustrated over their desire to have a hard keyboard. Come on. But anyway, so I had my Android One. I think I had no, that's not Java 1. Java 1, I had the 2, so I obviously had not joined Palm yet. While I was at Palm, I had the BlackBerry Curve, which was always a source of entertainment because people would laugh, like, why are you using that? You should be using a Palm Pre. And I would always say, honestly, I need a phone that works. So that's another story from another time as well. So I remember, why was I in the coffee shop? I think I can't remember when it fits in there. But anyway, I would sit in this coffee shop near my home and learn whatever the state of affairs was at the time, the art of developing for Android. So I built a location aware application. You'd fill in some very basic profile and it would plot you on a map with no identifier. It was just an icon. It was not a woke pair of icons. So I would update that. In fact, I've already started doing that. But it was essentially, it was called NookieMap, and it was the Nookie being, you can take that to mean whatever you like. But it was generally, I would like to go someplace where people are, let's say single or available, or are in general looking for the same things in compatible attribute sets, right? So back then, very basic. I am, a couple of fields, looking for, a couple of fields, ranges, right? And then here's where I am. And the idea was, if somebody were to say, where should I go this evening? Look on the map, and you can see, oh, here are places where there are other people who appear to fall into my looking for sets. And here they are in little clusters, right? So it really didn't reveal much about the people themselves. It was only whether they were very, very coarse matches for some very simple fields, right? So it was fun as a test, and it kind of worked as expected. And with my test data, I never rolled it out, but it was like, okay, this is the basic idea. So now, in our exciting world of everybody having stayed home for so long, and restaurants and bars and other places of congregation and aggregation seem to be reopening, why not? So why would I not turn NookieMap into a thing that actually works, right? In the age of Tinder and Bumble and all these other, Grindr, I don't even know, what's a kettle of fish, Match, Harmony. These are all, let me sit here and meet, quote unquote, meet someone, meet up. No, not meet up is a different type of dating app. Match and Harmony, eHarmony and Tinder. I think Match Corp owns all this, right? So monetizing the way people meet virtually, I guess, is interesting, and it can become quite complicated. I've actually tried I think I tried Kettle of Fish, and I tried there's another one. I don't know. They all seem the same at some point. Like, why am I bothering? Tinder is the worst. Actually, I will tell you, the use case for Tinder that it actually worked for me was when I was traveling for Intel. I would see who was, if I was in an airport and wherever. Okay, let's see who's around, and probably, less than 5% of the time, I would match with somebody and have like a discussion in the airport. Hey, how's it going? I'm traveling, blah, 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 blah. So it was very low expectation, curiosity, right? So the use case for Tinder is what it is. Match, eHarmony, and all the others along that ilk are more complicated, I think. They set the bar a little bit higher. So the entire notion with NookieMap is to take that, like, let me try to find the visually appealing or the within a certain radius, or somebody who has answered the same 1,000 questions that I have, or all all these schemes. Instead, just say, where's the cool place to hang out tonight, now, later, with people that might be on the same page as me. That's it. So anyway, so NookieMap CantHave, these are like simple additions or simple implementations, I guess, of subsets of features that are going into the other stuff I'm developing, right? So why am I not focusing on those? And that is the question of the week. So I'm sort of pivoting a little bit to say, hey, why don't I try those? That will be live testing of my entire core and application specific deployment, and go from there, right? So baby steps, getting out of the barn. And if all goes well, build on that to the next thing. So amidst the chaos that I've tried to illustrate in the cover episode art that I selected for this particular episode, see the show notes for attribution. If you've not used Upsplash, a great place to find some cool images with liberal terms of use, which is nice. So yeah, NookieMap CantHave, and then move on to F2IP and the mobile vendor satellites. That will all make sense later. And then eventually, my big projects will be trying to change the way people discover and connect. And I'm not talking NookieMap. I'm talking like sharing and getting away from the Facebooks and all that crap. So that's definitely for another episode, another time. So now I would like to tell a story that I still to this day find funny. It was sort of telling about the way I view things and maybe the way I do things. I was reminded of it when I, at some point, I think when I was actually working at Palm. It was when we were messing around with, it was pre-launch. The Palm Pre had not yet launched, and we were still developing. And somebody went through the process of cloning the modem, the IMEI, so they basically cloned a device so you could pretend to be the other device, right? Happens more frequently than it should. It's a hack. It's for stealing people's identity and credentials and whatnot. And when you're down in the internals of a mobile phone, you realize that, and I think my Facebook post at the time, and thanks to Facebook Memories, made a return lately. It was with all the we're surrounded by technology and innovation and all these devices that still rely on the AT command set, which is mostly true. And if you've ever used a Hayes modem or later a modem that implemented the Hayes command set, AT, ATDT, ATH, plus, S registers, all that stuff. So yeah, your $1,000 cell phone under the covers is using AT commands to dial and all this stuff. So I haven't dug into this stuff in the last couple of years, so I assume that's still true. But either way, there was a time when I was still learning how the world of connectivity could do my bidding. I worked at McDonald's, saved up my $3.45 an hour, eventually bought a Mitsuba 1200 baud modem. And I used it to dial into PBSs. I was in the Arizona Apple Users Group, which was initially called the Arizona Desert Apple Menagerie. So it was Adam 2. and I think they renamed themselves to the Arizona Apple Users Group, which that is another thing that I would love to talk about at some point. User groups, all that. So I would dial into BBSs and first learned how Telnet worked. Not Telenet, Telnet, and connecting to services and whatnot, and the first sort of tickling the notion of being a hacker, which I was never really. I never broke into anything. But I will tell you, I did use my modem to get the infamous Sprint codes for making free long-distance calls. So that was pretty straightforward. That was what we call brute force, dialing an access phone number and then trying different codes. So basically what I would do is I would dial the access number, I would dial a code, and then I would go ahead and dial a Telnet pop, I guess you could say, in my local area. And if the call went through, then I had a working number, and I would print it out to my CITO.matrix printer. And I would let it run overnight. And we had a second phone line in our house when I was, I think I was about 16 at the time. So very convenient. Didn't have any, Mom, hang up the phone problems. And I would let it run overnight. And I would wake up in the morning and, oh, look, I have 3 Sprint codes. And that was cool. And I really didn't do anything too nefarious other than it was convenient at payphones to be able to make calls without having change. And any nerds out there will know that there are or were other ways to do that, but Sprint codes were convenient. I wrote a war dialer. If you've seen the Matthew Broderick film War Games, you know that a war dialer is also fairly straightforward. So I had that. That was easy. So, and this fit in nicely with the whole Sprint code thing. So dial a phone, look for a connect, the modem tones that nobody knows what they are anymore. Hey, fun fact, when I was working at Intel, there was a team of developers working on serial device drivers for the Quark, which was on the Galileo board, and for other automotive and other embedded applications. So they were, I think we were in the cafeteria one day and in Ireland there, and they said, "What is EBDIC? And what is the?" They had no idea, and I said, "Oh, that's from like teletype days. Have you guys ever heard modem tones?" And they had no idea what I was talking about. So I thought that was sort of humorous that they're writing software for devices that they don't know what they sound like, look like, what people use them for, what does it mean. So kind of weird, kind of something to think about. So anyway, so I had my war dialer. I was able to find Sprint codes. I had a friend who was taken away at gunpoint by federal marshals for telecommunications fraud. So he gave me his hacking notebooks, which was probably bad idea. But so one day, pause for a beverage, water. So one day I was in Baskin-Robbins where my friend Pete was a manager. And I think he's 2 years older than me. So 18-year-old kid with a pager. Remember those days? Digital pager. So we're in Baskin-Robbins, a slow day. And he pulls up the pager. Oh. And he dials the number. Says, "Hey, this is Pete. Did you page me?" Hangs up. I said, "Oh, no, I don't know who. It was the wrong number," or whatever. And I said, "Wait, if somebody calls you, pages you, you call them back?" And he said, "Well, it could be somebody I need to call back. So I don't really, there were known, this is before the days of caller ID. So there were certain phone numbers and people would attach a 911 or hey, it's an emergency, call me." And if he knew my phone number, my home phone number, or somebody's work number, that was fine. But if you're calling from a payphone, remember pre-cell phone days, yeah, how do you know whether I want to call this back? So you just call back. So I found this fascinating. I went home, thought about it, dialed a few phone numbers around I think it was PageNet in the prefix, and I noticed that, well, they had a whole block of suffixes that were dedicated to pagers. Well, that makes sense, of course. Right? So everybody had their own, well, I think there were probably extension pagers. That was probably cheaper, but essentially you could dial prefix 0001 all the way to thousands of pagers later and say put the same phone number on them. So really, take my war dialer, the Sprint code finding version, which would, so that the Sprint code would dial one phone number, the access number, type in a changing string of potential Sprint code, and then dial a connect number pop for telnet, and then it would recognize that it got a connection tone and print it out or try again. The war dialer would go through a set of phone numbers starting with a prefix starting at the zero, starting at whatever to whatever, dial, look for a connect tone, print it out. So now, what if I took a pager prefix range, suffix range, and a prefix, dial the number, put somebody's phone number, and hang up? The beeper program was born. And so a couple times, I'm trying to think, probably the funniest one would be, I used to work at McDonald's. I think I mentioned that. That's how I got my modem. Being in a mall, it was easy enough to stand outside of the McDonald's, but it wasn't a freestanding store, so we could stand out in front of the Broadway upstairs at Metro Center. And I laugh now because I can actually still picture it. And so people working, the managers, were hovering over the phone, and it was nonstop ringing for days. And it was essentially the number for McDonald's on 1,000 digital pagers in the space of a couple of hours. And that was good for days and days of fun. And so I call it a human distributed denial of service attack. Totally legitimate. It worked. I called the pager company at some point, and they assured me that there was really nothing they could do about what you could call a crank call. And while there was certainly a load placed on their system, 1,000 pagers being dialed in sequence. By the way, if I were to do that again, I would shuffle the suffix ordering. But anyway, so dialing straight through, I think I could do 5 pagers a minute because it was soft delays, right? It would just asynchronously wait like 2 seconds and then dial the phone number and then hang up. So the pager company didn't treat 1,000 incoming calls with a number as too much of a load on the system. And technically it was, but not significant. And for the customer, getting one unusual, unexpected, errant, or sort of arguably malicious number on their pager was not harassment. It wasn't even really much trouble. And only a certain percentage of them were in that I got to call it back boat. So if I left numbers on 1,000 pagers, that doesn't mean they were getting 1,000 calls, but it does mean that some people were trying to call back. So they'd get it busy, they'd keep calling. So I think about 1,000 pagers, about 3 days worth of phone issues. So good times. I don't think it would work today. Not even close with caller ID and a move away from POTS, plain old telephony services. I know I myself am really not using a phone number anymore. I think I sold my car, but apparently my car warranty is in need of attention. I get probably 1 or 2 phone calls about that a week. I get random other phone calls. Definitely the local prefix calls, right? So my cell phone is from the Silicon Valley days, so I'll get a incoming call with the same area code and prefix. Sometimes it's a warranty. Sometimes it's a election. Back before the elections, it was election surveys or push polls or whatever. So really, voice telephony, not really a thing. I use WeChat for China. I use Telegram. I've all but gotten rid of SMS. I mean, similar problem. So Telegram, Signal. Telegram is sort of call it a baseline, I guess. So most people have found that easy to use. It's easy to sign up for. They're adding some features. I actually recorded a podcast using Telegram's new audio chat feature, which is, it's okay. I've never used Clubhouse because I'm not cool. I don't have an iPhone. But it's essentially the same, right? Admins, guests, people chatting, you can have them drop in. So Telegram as a general text and calling replacement even, I've done voice calls with Telegram, works fine. Signal for the nerdier type, that's a little bit more security aware and pays attention, also works fine. And then I use Element, which is the client for the new name. I think it used to be called Rebel. But yeah, Element is the client available on various platforms, and matrix.org. And they're probably, I don't know if Matrix server is using Synapse, but they have a Python and a Go based server, all open source, end to end, encrypted, and all kinds of good things. So yeah, the future of POTS is really kind of the MySpace of communication services, right? It's blink tags and ugly styles and noise and random people that you don't know, and everybody else has moved on. So the beeper program, the pager hack, the human distributed denial of service, I guess it'd be a human net, was a really interesting learning experience. And probably the take home would be, what do people do when they encounter something they don't readily, I'll say, understand, right? Your pager is giving you a phone number. I guess I'll call it because that's what I do. And that today would probably translate into, I'm going to click on something. That's because it's an email from somebody I know, or it looks okay, or so they click on it. So it kind of all falls in the same bin of maybe a spear phishing type thing. Anyway, I can't say I do talk about it, so I'm not hiding it, but I don't view it as a proud, it's not a point of pride, but it is a story, and it was a learning experience, and I find it humorous. And because it wasn't too widespread, I don't cry myself to sleep thinking about the pager program, but yeah, I don't think it's something I would do again. I don't think I could do it again. And now that I have more experience in the world interacting with people and certainly receiving my share of these crank, malicious or otherwise problematic phone calls and texts, I probably have a greater appreciation. And isn't that what it's all about, is understanding your users, especially from their point of view? Anyway, so that was an interesting time. It was, I want to say I'm going to say 87. So probably before some of you were born, maybe right around the same time. And how the world has changed since. Anyway, thank you for listening. Check out the show notes for that attribution. I am trying to. I have another show called FFS Talk, which is also on Anchor. And there's a show I'm trying to kind of assemble. The Quaggling Sand is much more casual. And if someone ever wants to join as a guest or whatever you want to label, I do have a Telegram channel. I will have a website eventually someday. It's on the list. But so Quaggling Sand is much more casual. FFS is, my goal is to have a little bit more structured discussion about particular topic arcs. And FFS is an expression I heard and said more than once while I was in Ireland many times. But it's essentially what works and what doesn't and what can we do about it. And it's, here's an issue, FFS. I'll keep it clean today. We should fix that, or we should change that. And so the next episode, as I'm speaking right now, the next episode, which is converging on viable production, is still solo. So it's just me talking, but it's really getting at the crux of what the show is about, which is, as I just mentioned, and the working title is Delivering Big Delta. The idea is how do you change the world? And what I would present as a, not an argument, but a point of order. People will say they want to change the world, or they propose these big ideas, which are good. I love big ideas. I have some myself. But then what happens when you try to unleash that on people? Small population, large population. And some examples include, what do you do when you have to convince everybody on the planet to do something different or else, right? I'm talking about the pandemic. So suddenly some people are fine with wearing masks. Some people are fine staying home. Other people argue. Some people get violent. So that was an urgent change of behavior that was essential. Arguably, the science, there will be people that argue against it. I would agree. The science was pointing quite clearly at, minimize exposure, minimize infection. Let's work on the vaccine. So all that stuff, we don't have to revisit that here. So the big delta was, hey, we need to change behavior. We need to stop traveling. We need to stay away from other people and all that. The big delta could be, one of the other examples is the change of theoretical physics about the model. What is it? The theory of everything. So string theory, geometric unity, if you're an Eric Weinstein fan. I don't remember what he calls it, the theory of computational physics, maybe, from Wolfram. And there are a couple more, the many worlds, all these different things. And these are huge deltas, right? But they have an infrastructure, physicists have an infrastructure for presenting and defending and initiating, I guess, and defending arguments and proofs, and arguably a sticky crowd. Eric Weinstein has gone on at length about, what does he call it? The distributed the disk. I don't know. I can't remember what it is right now. But basically there's a club and you're either in or you're out or all that. Maybe it's like if they don't have an iPhone, they can't participate. I don't know. But basically, if you're in the physicist community, or if you're not, I think Eric Weinstein is actually a math major from MIT. So I'm not a huge Weinstein fan either, Brett or Eric, but I've listened to what they had to say. So those are big deltas, but there's an infrastructure in place to argue and be critical. And that's I think it's fascinating. And I'm not a physicist, I'm an engineer, but I find it interesting, and I've certainly spent time watching, listening, reading. So that's interesting. So big ideas, big changes. There's the Game B stuff. If you're familiar with Daniel Schmachtenberger, Jim Rutt, Brett Weinstein, there's a whole list of people throwing around this idea. It's several years old now, about the Game A of today and Game B being sort of a different, they call it a social operating system. That's a big delta. And that's probably a good example. And it was really, I kind of got a little kick in the butt on this when Jim Rutt was talking about holacracy, which was an idea that I first got exposed to when they rolled it out in the Downtown Project and Zappos. And I live in Las Vegas. I was never involved in either, but I was a spectator and I watched all these things. And in my first FFS show, I talked about the last mile and the Downtown Project, and how I thought that was one of the fundamental disconnects was what would actually happen once someone's in the Downtown Project, right? So that last mile of expectation and service and delivery, not of a package so much, but of promises, so to speak. So yeah, you have this big idea, Game B. You have people doing what they do now, Game A, or you have people coming to the Downtown Project. They've been promised a community, the return on community focus, the delivering happiness ethos that was presented in the book by the late Tony Hsieh. Obviously, Tony's not around to argue this, so I'm not taking on Tony Hsieh's legacy, but the notions that were laid down in the Downtown Project of community and the holacratic management infrastructure, I guess is a good word, maybe, that they try to pursue as a new idea. Well, you can present this new holacracy like, hey, we're going to do this differently. And you can try to train people, which they sort of did, and just like Game B, you can try to describe how you get there. But I think that is really the critical part. And that's sort of ending up, what do we do about it? The theme of the entire show, FFS, is, what works, what doesn't, what do we do about it? So if you want to go from what doesn't work to something else, keeping in mind what does work, what do we do about it is apply what does work or something informed by that to take what doesn't work and turn it into something that does work. Maybe it's something new like Game B or a Downtown Project run by holacracy. But how do you get there? And is everybody going to follow you? And what's the value of critical review before, during, and after? And I think these are all fascinating topics because they really get to the crux of the speed at which things change or do not, and the impact of those is more apparent, maybe not visible, but apparent. Sometimes honestly apparent, sometimes only apparent in perception, but not, let's say, reality. That makes sense, right? Like I think I know what's going on. I think I understand how the pandemic is not killing people because of what I heard on Facebook or in a No Agenda podcast or whatever. So all these signals are flying at people. And so the path to the big delta, I think, is even more interesting than the delta itself. You could argue that's the delta, but how do we get there? And so this next episode of FFS is turning out to be something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and well, there you go. And I'm looking forward to adding guests to that show as well. The nature of startup podcasting. Who knew? So I think I'm going to end it on this note. I have, for fun, I have a Buy Me a Coffee page. If you're interested in supporting this effort or any of the things I'm working on, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. Check it out. I will launch a website or 10 for all the various things I'm working on. I'm sure you'll hear about that here. In the meantime, I have danhugo.substack.com. I have a Monday newsletter I'm sending out. I am also on Review, which is the Twitter version of Substack, if you will. So I do a Thursday newsletter on Review. And as this is Thursday, you can probably expect to get one of those, or you can find issue number 2 today, 29th. So yes, seek that out if you like, and check out the Substack and follow this podcast. There will be a home feed of it. Right now it's basically through Anchor. Anchor is what it is. It does what it does. FFS Talk is also on Anchor. Hugo Floss is also on Anchor. Check any of those out. And there will be podcasts and other things for other projects. And so the ball has only just begun rolling. Uphill. Both ways. Sisyphus is in charge. Hercules is trying. On that note, thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time. I don't know when that will be exactly, but probably when NookieMap and or CantHave are rolled out, I will have plenty to say. Until then, stay safe, get your vaccination, and be healthy. Bye-bye.